Hey, everybody, thanks for joining. Thanks for taking the time to hop on and listen to what we have to talk about with RoomSuite. As we go through this, as Angela mentioned, we're going to be kind of watching that Q&A and answering those things. I will say this: this presentation will kind of build on some stuff. So maybe feel free to hold off a little bit on those questions because we'll probably answer it as time goes on. Let's see if I click the right thing here. There we go. So kind of the agenda that we're going to walk through on this. So the why RoomSuite, get into the intro of RoomSuite or the what is RoomSuite, building a system. So the how do I use it, and then that scaling up of the how do I scale it, or as I like to call, but wait, there's more. So kind of walk through that here. So let's kind of start on this why RoomSuite. Um, so you probably hear us talk at Q-SYS. This is probably not a new concept for some folks that have been around for a little bit of places, spaces, and applications. So let's maybe talk about a corporate campus. This same thing that we're going to walk through could apply for many different places, but let's just kind of stick with corporate for right now to settle on one thing. So the places, so this is going to be an office building or buildings that these spaces are in. So these are the workplaces made up of different spaces for folks to gather, work, collaborate in. And then the application. So what are the requirements for each of these spaces as far as what does it needs to do? Is it a hardware application? Is it a software application? And when we talk about this, we're going to talk about some different spaces and kind of where Q-SYS historically has sat in these spaces. So I like to pull up the MLM, as I call it, of the corporate campus world, or some people call it a pyramid, but MLM's a little bit more fun. So the first kind of space we're going to talk about are these specialized or purpose-built spaces. These are spaces, usually a one-off space in a corporate, very purpose-built, either large-scale deployment of peripherals, lots of crazy things going on in that room. This is definitely a place that Q-SYS has fit for quite some time with the scalability of our Q-SYS core systems. Kind of moving on up that stack, we get into some customized rooms. So maybe these are larger boardrooms, still kind of one-offs. Maybe there's very similar rooms as we get into this. Again, we've been doing stuff like that for quite some time. And then we get into standardized rooms. So now we're getting a little bit more into the cookie cutter rooms, where it's your customers talking about room types, room type A, room type B. We all know that there's never two rooms that are exactly the same. So it always ends up, hey, we need another room type A, but an extra monitor, but it's a larger space, so we need more speakers. So these are just standardized spaces that we can, for the most part, very similar to the rest of the spaces, with just a little bit of difference in there. When we get into the mass deployment spaces, these are literal cookie cutter spots where it is the exact same equipment going into these spots. Usually smaller rooms, huddle spaces, very small conference rooms kind of things. When we kind of look at all these room types and we bring up the awesome Q-SYS-ometer to see where Q-SYS fits in here, we can kind of see that, again, these larger spaces, these bigger conference rooms, these are things that Q-SYS has been doing for quite some time. But when we get into these smaller spaces, it's actually not that we can't do them. We still do those spaces with Q-SYS core systems. It's just that it's not super scalable. It's a little more costly than what the outcome is. If the room only needs one microphone or two microphones, a couple cameras, a couple speakers, our smallest core still does 64 network I/O. So that's a lot of power to put in a room that we just need one or two mics, a couple ceiling speakers, things like that. The other thing we want to talk about, the other thing we need to address is this mass deployment of these systems. So if I'm going in with a typical Q-SYS system, for those of you that have been around Q-SYS for quite some time, you're hopefully quite familiar with Q-SYS Designer. It's the software we use to commission these core systems and program and all that other fun stuff. Still relatively easy to use, simple to use, especially for a small room. But there's still some programming that goes along with that. And so really the other thing we wanted to solve is just this mass deployment of these small spaces. So typical Q-SYS core system would look something like this. We've got some infrastructure in there of the actual core. Since Q-SYS is a network-based audiovisual and control system, that network switch, super important. So that guy's in there. We've probably got some video over IP going on there, so some video peripherals. And then the actual endpoints for the room, the purpose-built boxes that are cameras, microphones, speakers, all that fun stuff. For doing a UC system, maybe it's got a dedicated compute system in there, or BYOD, or both. It's also very, very common. And then when we go to deploy this, we're using that Q-SYS Designer. Again, pretty simple, but it does take a little bit of commissioning. It does take some knowledge in Q-SYS Designer to make that all function. We're creating these custom UCIs that are going to be deployed on the touch panel. We're going to go into this room and we're going to have to do some DSP work for the audio side of things. We can still, monitor it with Reflect, but that's probably about, depending on the size of the system, probably a day or so of, commissioning, programming, things like that. Here's kind of a quick little look of what that designer file might look like. Again, nothing super taxing to create. But someone still had to go in and drag all these blocks in, wire all that stuff. That still adds up to time. Time that usually a programmer is doing, and we all know that programmers' time is not cheap. So that all adds up. So what RoomSuite is trying to, the three big things that we're trying to do with RoomSuite. So the first part is simplified deployment. So easy to physically install this using standard networking cable that, hopefully by now everyone should be really well versed in terminating and running. A simplified configuration. So, getting away from that Q-SYS Designer and getting into a web-based, no programming kind of setup. And then to still be able to manage these systems and, mass deploy them through the cloud, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So that was kind of the why. Let's get into what in the world is RoomSuite. Well, so RoomSuite is a kind of new category for us here at Q-SYS. So with that, there will be some more stuff to come with RoomSuite down the road. But today, this is what is out. And this is the base bundle for RoomSuite. And that base bundle is a combination of the RMP100 processor with the QIO Ven4 expander. These are not sold separately right now. This is a bundle. This is the only RoomSuite SKU, if you will, for Q-SYS. The RMP100 is kind of the brains of the operation, meant to live behind the display in the room or the credenza. And then that QIO Ven4 is a table expander, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Could go out of table, might go to lectern. There's some different places for that. So interesting enough, since this is kind of a new product line for us, the RMP100 or the RoomSuite system does not require a Q-SYS core to function. So for those of you that have been around Q-SYS for a while, you know that we've talked a lot about the heart of every Q-SYS system is that Q-SYS core processor. This RoomSuite system does not need a core. In fact, it doesn't intermingle with the core in any way, shape, or form. You can't go up into inventory in Designer and add a RoomSuite system or add an RMP 100 to the inventory. These are standalone, completely separate systems. So let's kind of, get to the fun side of it, and let's turn this thing around the back and let's check out what we've got actually, what we can connect to it. So the first thing that we see is a USB-A and USB-C port. Forget that USB-A port exists right now. That's just kind of a future expansion thing. But that USB-C port on the back of that RMP 100, that's the bridge for the system. So for those of you, again, that are super familiar with the Q-SYS side of things, you know that we do our cameras a little bit differently from other folks. Our cameras stay network streams, which allows us to add lots of different cameras and send them to different bridges because they're converted to USB at the last minute. So we're not switching USB and routing USB and all that other fun stuff. So that USB bridge is where we get that connection to get our cameras and microphone audio and things like that to a PC or laptop. Moving on, there are some HDMI connections on the back of the RMP 100. Got a couple HDMI inputs, so maybe there's a room PC, whatever you want to plug into this that has HDMI connections. The RMP 100, those HDMI ins and outs are 4K 60. Again, two HDMI outputs. Maybe this will live behind a display. And so we're feeding the display with it. There's also some other things that we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into dedicated rooms where those connections come into play. Control. So there's a little bit of control with the RoomSuite system. You said, but wait, Steve, you said no custom programming and things like that. What are we talking about control? Well, we've got some simplified control options. When we're talking about these small, medium conference rooms, really we're not controlling lighting, shades, that kind of stuff. We can still do all that on a Q-SYS core system. Really, we're talking about controlling, displays, on off input, that kind of thing. So we can just control displays for a RoomSuite system over CEC, serial connection, or IP connection. We also have a little bit of GPIO in RS-232 for that serial connection. GPIO would be for connecting a room sensor. So maybe we want a room sensor so that those displays turn on or off automatically based upon movement in that room. That's really the control function of this. Now we'll talk about how that integrates into the touch panel and things like that here in a little bit. We do have some aux networks. So this is where we would connect the RMP system to the building network. So if we wanted to connect to the building LAN for management or for cloud management, that's where those would connect to. These are completely separate network interfaces from that integrated network switch that we're going to talk about here in a second. So completely different IP sets and things like that we'll get from that. So good separation so that all the AV peripherals don't end up on your customer's network. As I mentioned, and probably the first thing that you all saw when I showed this picture, we have an integrated, technically 8-port network switch into this. So one of the nice things about RoomSuite, we're not using other network switches to make this happen. This is kind of all in a closed system. When I say technically it's an 8-port, you could probably count it up. There are 8 ports there. But one of those ports, that first one, is actually a PoE++ port that we're actually going to run over to that QIO Ven 4 expander. And that powers QIO Ven 4, and it also connects all the control, video, audio data through that. So a single cable can get us those expansions at the table. So if we're looking at this QIO Ven 4, we see we do have some USB and some HDMI connections. So again, ignore that USB-A connector. That does nothing right now. But that USB-C connector, We do have a little bit more functionality on this USB-C than on the RMP 100 because this USB-C will also support DisplayPort alt mode. So that gives us the ability to set that laptop down on the table, plug in a single USB-C cable, get the video to route to the displays, as well as that bridging capabilities. We also still have an HDMI connection there for an input. There is also a small network switch integrated into this. So things that we need to connect to the network that are on the table. So things like table mics, touch panels, things like that. Let's take a look at just a really simplified system just to kind of show how these things are connected. So we see we've got that RMP 100 probably mounted behind this display. We've got a couple of our network peripherals. So network soundbar, network camera plugged in just right there to that RMP 100. And then the HDMI run into that display to feed that display. That single network cable or CAT cable running out to the QIO Ven 4 at the table, assumed table at this point. Again, we've got a few of our network microphones plugged in there at that QIO Ven 4, as well as a touch panel and that USB-C connection to that laptop. So very simplified wiring system here. We're using, short USB, short HDMI connections, and standard CAT cable connections to get to all the peripherals. So we have some setup modes for RoomSuite. So right now it supports a Microsoft Teams dedicated environment, a Zoom Room dedicated environment, or BYOD, or bring your own meeting environment, where the customer doesn't have a specified Zoom Teams, they just want to bring a laptop or have a PC in the room that could operate any of them. Double click and open that. So now that we've talked a little bit about the RoomSuite hardware side of things, we really need to talk about the software side of things. So once I have set this thing up, I've plugged everything into the RMP 100 and that QIO Ven 4. I really just go into that web UI of that device, and that's how I manage it. So for those of you that have been around Q-SYS for a little bit of time, this is probably not going to look too unfamiliar to you. This is exactly what our core manager looks like. This is what Reflect looks like. So it's that same look and feel that you're used to. So you're not having to go completely learn a brand new software or thing like that to commission this compared to a Q-SYS core system. I'm really bad about clicking things, so this was actually a video that walks you kind of through it. So I think I was supposed to talk about that. Not so good about clicking through some stuff. So this is just kind of that overview of what that looks like. We see the peripherals that are attached to it. We've got some DSP settings and some things here that we'll talk about next. Again, so once we get this device set up, plugged in, ready to go, one of the first things we can do, if you're using the Q-SYS microphones, our NMT1 and our speakers, we can do something called automatic room optimization. And so what that's going to do, once you go into that web UI and click that function, it's going to take a few minutes. It's going to play some sounds to the speakers, pick it up through the microphone, and it's going to give us a really good starting level for that room EQ, audio levels, things like that. Which means that you don't have to, again, send out your top audio person to go out and commission this room. It's, I say the folks that are running the cables, that are installing the displays, installing the cameras, they're going to be the ones that after all that's set up, they're going to take a few extra minutes in that room and go through this web UI configuration and get that room up. So we've talked about the why, we've talked about the what is it. always a huge fan of let's put this to practice. Let's build a few systems that kind of helps show where these things live, why we would use some things that one thing over another, and we'll also get into some limitations. So the first thing we want to talk about are these ports and power. So anybody familiar with designing network-based audio-visual systems, you know that PoE power is definitely something to pay attention to. No matter what network switch it is, there are maximum power per port and per whole switch. So all these ports that the peripherals connect to are PoE ports with a max total for the whole system at 212 watts. We do have 75 watts that are going to the QIO Ven 4, with a little bit of that being eaten up by the actual device power, but that gives us 50 watts for the peripherals there at the QIO 4. And if we're good at math, that tells us we've got about 130 watts left over at the actual RMP 100. So always really good to keep paying attention to that, making sure that your PoE, you're not exceeding your PoE limits per port or per switch. One really cool thing about the RMP setup is it'll actually tell you right there in big letters, numbers, I should say, on the web UI, it'll tell you how much you're using. So that, kind of a first step in troubleshooting. If I plug something in and it's not powering on, I'm probably going to check this real quick and make sure I haven't exceeded that PoE limit for that device. So this is a big one. So what we're doing with RoomSuite, again, we're trying to make these things as simple deployments with a little bit of scalability depending on the room need. So how many cameras in the room, how many speakers, how many microphones. We're not getting into crazy control. We can absolutely do that with a Q-SYS core system. We've been talking about RoomSuite for a bit. And I've kind of come up with, what I tell people if the question starts with what if, that's probably a Q-SYS core system. We really have kept this pretty locked into what we can connect to it and the quantity of things that we can connect to it to keep that simplified integration kind of cohesive. So because of that, we do have some max peripherals that we can connect to it. Now, if you've been paying attention to the math, the first limit is the fact that we've got essentially 11 PoE network ports. So there's the first limitation. We can't have more than 11 devices plugged into this because we don't have enough ports for that. It is not scalable to add more network switches. We can't just plug in another AV network switch into RoomSuite and plug more devices into it. That won't work. So we are locked to 11 right now. So here's kind of the, overview of the peripherals and things we can connect to it. Almost all these are Q-SYS devices. Again, we are trying to keep this as simplified for folks as we possibly can. But there is one part where we kind of deviate from a Q-SYS device and allow some other things, and that's the ceiling microwave, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Well, let's actually dig into all these peripherals and these limits. So if we want to look at the speaker side of things, the audio side of things, the first limitation we come up across is we can connect up to 4 of our network loudspeakers in the ceiling format. So whether that's the NLC for in-ceiling or NLP for network pendant, and up to 2 of our network soundbars. Mix and match, but we can't do like 6 ceiling speakers. It can only be up to 4 ceiling speakers, up to 2 of the LSB42s. When we get into the microphone side of things, we can connect up to 4 of our NMT1s. And this is where we kind of deviate again from that Q-SYS only peripheral. So the RMP does come with essentially a 1x1 Dante license. So we can integrate a ceiling microarray from another third-party manufacturer. 1x1, meaning that we can use the Dante receive channel to actually get the microphone audio. And then we're using that return channel to send the AEC information so that the microphone can handle that AEC. Now, we can technically still do 3 NMT1s and 1 ceiling microarray. The thing I would caution there is just make sure you're micing the right things. Don't put a ceiling microarray and then right over a table and then put 3 more NMT1s on the table. That's A, a waste of money, B, that's going to cause some issues for you of everyone being picked up by all these microphones. But maybe you've got a situation where you've got a table that needs a couple of NMT1s and then maybe a large area at the front of the room or something like that that also needs to be covered. That's where that kind of application would come into play. So when we're talking about the cameras, so we can connect up to 2 of our network cameras. They can be a mix and match. So it could be a single NC90, which is our fixed frame EPTZ camera with some tile view functionality. Could be, multiple or 2 of our PTZ cameras, or it could be a mix and match. I think a lot of these rooms will probably end up being those NC90 cameras at the camera mounted at the front of the display. But maybe this room also has a little bit of, a presentation area at the front of the room. And so maybe we need to get a PTZ camera in there to cover that space as well. The only camera that doesn't work with the RoomSuite system is our NC Pro 15X. And that's because that is a broadcast grade camera that probably no one would be trying to fit into this small space anyways, since we're going for scalable, cost-effective kind of thing. So we've seen this slide before. This is the slide where I kind of walk through all the typical Q-SYS core things that we're all used to. So this same system, if we were to kind of switch that over to a RoomSuite system, might look something like this. So we've dropped the core, we've dropped the network switch, we've dropped the video product. So it's less boxes, less things going into the system. We also no longer need a Q-SYS designer. So saving some time and money there. We're just doing this web-based UCI commissioning. And we can still do a little bit of customization on that UCI. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. DSP tuning, well, it's for the most part done for us if we use that audio optimization. By the way, you can always run that optimization and then go back and kind of tweak it a little bit. Catching some of these questions, I do want to address this one. So somebody asked, can we use third-party cameras? No. So it only will work with Q-SYS network cameras and NC cameras at that, not the older TZs. So let's kind of, again, build a little system to kind of go through this. So we're going to build a 7-person meeting room, conference room. So microphone, speakers. This is going to be a BYOD setup. They wanted some camera with automation and then a touch panel. Well, since this is a RoomSuite training, we're probably going to go ahead and just assume we're going to go ahead and put a RoomSuite system in there. It's great application for it. So our NMT1 microphones. So again, these are not anything that are new to RoomSuite. Our NM microphones have been around for a while. It's a single cable solution. They're PoE powered. Sit nice on the table. There's some soft buttons in there for muting and things like that. So a room of this size, probably just 2 of those microphones would work great on the table. And then when we talk about the speakers for the room, those NL sound bars work really good. Probably just two of these with one on either side of the display, vertical, absolutely would be perfectly fine. So what that kind of looks like is we're just going to add those sound bars, connect them up over standard cat cable. We're going to connect those NMT ones at the expander because they're going to sit there at the table. So again, just short cat cables. So that takes care of our microphones and speakers. So audio for the room is good. What about this BYOD and cameras? Well, let's talk about the video side of this. It's pretty simplified wiring diagram on the video side. Again, we can add two of our NC cameras. Could be a PTZ, could be two PTZs, could be two NC90s, mix and match. Again, probably really short cable runs. These things are probably going to live, at least one of them right by the display, plugged into that RMP100. The displays in the room are just going to be fed off that HDMI outputs. Then at the table, that single USB-C connection will give folks, again, that laptop video to route to the displays, as well as the bridge so that the camera through a microphone get backhauled and show up at that laptop to start some sort of C call. So when we start to add this to that wiring diagram we have, again, short pre-mades of USB-C, HDMI cables, and really just standard cat cables to connect this thing up. Not a lot on the wiring side of things. Well, let's talk about control because this is probably one of the more powerful things with RoomSuite. When we compare the user interface design setup of RoomSuite versus the typical Q-SYS core system, again, those of you that are familiar with the Q-SYS core systems, you know that we can create these awesome UCIs by simple drag and drop of a schematic, drag the button that you want to do the specific thing over to the UCI and then make it pretty. Change the button size, change the color, change the text, name it, make it easy for the end user. It's pretty simple. But when we get into RoomSuite, it's even easier because it's actually all done automatically for you. When I plug all those things into that UCI, when I plug all those things into that RMP100 and that QIO-VEN4, and I hit that web UI, it's going to pull that network switch that's internal to those, and it's going to know what devices you have plugged into this. And so it's going to create a user interface automatically and deploy it on the panel. Now, we have a little bit of scalability here in that we've got, options like changing color, look, feel, changing the font size. We can add a customer logo to this. We could add a one extra page to this that would be like a help page kind of thing, where you could put a QR code to contact help or phone number to contact for assistance kind of thing. Again, people that go out and run the cables, install the TV, they're the ones kind of doing this simple setup of the user interface, not programmers and more costly setups. A few slides ago, you saw that we talked about it being used for Zoom rooms, Microsoft Teams rooms. Again, we can get that look and feel kind of automatically applied to the panel based upon what we select. If this is a Microsoft Teams room, then it knows that UCI is going to look and feel like a Teams room. If we select a Zoom room, it's going to look and feel like that Zoom room. We'll actually see some examples of that later on in this presentation. And then last kind of thing to talk about when we're talking about the control side and the automatic stuff that happens with that. Again, for those of you that are familiar with the Q-SYS core side of things, you're hopefully familiar with the call sync feature. What that is we basically are getting the USB information from PC, laptop, whatever it's connected to at least know if there's a call connected, if a microphone's muted, a camera's muted, that privacy mode. And we're passing that on down to the peripherals and then vice versa. So what that looks like, if I'm in a Teams call and I hit team or mute on my PC, I would want that microphone in the room to turn red to let me know that, hey, this microphone is muted. Vice versa, if I'm in a Teams call and I hit mute on the microphone, it's going to actually mute it in Teams because that would be pretty detrimental if the microphone turned red and it actually didn't mute anything. That could be some fun conversations. So that call sync is automatically set up. No editing needed for that UC sync. So if we're looking at this wiring diagram that we've kind of started on this room, as far as adding control to it, we can add in that user interface, in our case, this TSC panel. We're going to control these displays over CEC because we really are just talking display on and off, so nothing crazy going on there. And then maybe there's a room sensor in here, so we can actually turn that system on and off based upon if there's anybody actually even in the room. One thing I did realize I probably skipped over a little bit when we were talking about room requirements or the peripheral requirements. I realized I just completely glazed over the fact of the TSC, the amount and the sizes that we can connect to the system. We can get up to 2 of our TSC panels, either the 7-inch or the 10-inch panel. Could be 1 of each, but you've got 2 panels max in that system. So moving on to the scaling up, or what I call, but wait, there's more. Let's talk about a little bit of a larger space. And really for this application, the size of the room really isn't what makes this a scaled system. Again, maybe we've got a couple of cameras in there, maybe a couple more microphones, a couple more speakers. What we really want to focus on in this part is actually the fact that this is going to be a dedicated UC room, dedicated Zoom, dedicated Teams. That's where some functionality is going to come into play that we want to talk about. So if we remove Q-SYS for a minute from the conference room, wouldn't recommend it, but we're just going to talk about it for a second of what that typical simple UC compute setup might look like. So whether you're using Zoom or Teams, all of them, the first requirement is you have to have a compute that is okayed or certified by them running their software. The other thing that is a requirement of them is you have to have this certified controller that they've stamped as, yes, this works, to make the calls, control the room kind of thing. And then we've got to have a way for folks to get their video content from a laptop into the room system to share. Some controllers have that content share on the panel. Some are just on the compute side of things. And then we just have to have the right room peripherals, speakers, mics, camera, thing like that. So this works out really great for, again, just some really small rooms where there's really not a lot of flexibility, but that's okay. They just need a Teams room to dial, call it good. Well, let's look at kind of what that would look like with a RoomSuite system and the functionality that we get with adding that RoomSuite system. So we still need that UC compute. We still need that certified controller. We're going to put our control on top of it as a second page experience. So we don't need a team certified controller and then a Q-SYS touch panel sitting right next to it. That's just going to confuse folks and not cost effective. We're going to get our control on top of that glass from someone else that's Teams or Zoom certified. We're going to actually take the RMP, and instead of feeding the displays, we're actually going to use the RMP and RoomSuite system as the content share. So that bridging connection and the content share into the compute would be the connection for that RMP. The table expander, again, connects over a single cable, and it gives us that laptop BYOD connection. So now instead of just getting one one HDMI connection for a content share, I essentially now have three because I've got the inputs on that RMP 100 and I've got the inputs on that table expander. So that gives me some other options for actually starting this content share. And then the other benefit is I've got some, those peripherals are all network peripherals, but they're going to show up as that USB connection through that Teams. And now I can, again, provide a little bit of scalability in that room as far as the appropriate microphones and speakers and all that fun stuff. When we look about what connecting these things might look like, so we need that USB connection for that bridge. That's going to get us the cameras, microphone audio into that compute. The HDMI, so the output of the RMP 100 is going to go to the content in of the PC there, and then that PC output will feed those displays. This is where this starts to deviate a little bit from our typical Q-SYS core systems. So everything we've talked about right now is exactly the same on our Q-SYS core systems. We do second page control every day on those systems. This one, we actually need a network connection from the RMP 100 on one of those peripheral ports to the compute for that second page control. So essentially you end up with that compute needs two network connections. Now there are quite a few out there that are making these computes with multiple NICs, but just it's worth noting you may potentially need some sort of like USB network interface to make that happen, because that PC has to connect to the Q-SYS RMP 100 for that second page control, and it obviously needs to connect to that building LAN so it can still get out and make the call and all that other fun stuff. We can still connect that aux LAN to that system to remotely manage the RoomSuite system. And again, may possibly need that USB NIC. So this is what that would look like for a kind of typical UC, dedicated UC install for a RoomSuite system with Q-SYS control on that second page experience. Well, what does that second page experience look like? Again, when we go back to when we selected in the setup that user of the user interface as Zoom and Teams, that kind of magically told the UCI what to look and feel like. So it might look something like this. This would be an example of the Zoom user interface. For those of you that are super familiar with Zoom, it looks and feels like a typical Zoom panel. Again, folks are able to kind of select the input that they want to share to Zoom, or they can kind of just select that bring your own meeting switch over. So the look and feel of what that same thing would be like with the Teams CSS. So again, same information. Your user still has the ability, no matter where they're at, to change the inputs, change the cameras, and hit any of the other, help page or anything like that that any typical Q-SYS UCI would do. So that kind of checks everything for this room. And fun fact, this is actually a real room. This is our a room in our experience center in London that is running this RoomSuite system that we just kind of built. When we talk about scalability, let's talk a little bit about those NMT1s, what that microphone coverage can be, because really this is probably a huge thing when we talk about how big the room is. We need to talk about that microphone coverage and how many microphones and what is that crossover point for. Okay, we need more microphones or microphone coverage than what a RoomSuite system can handle. So we need to get back into that Q-SYS core system. So the NMT1 radius is around 6 feet. So if you've got 4 of them, which is the max number of NMT1s that we can connect to that system, you're looking at about 24 feet. So about a 24-foot table is where we're kind of calling it for that. Doesn't mean if your table is 26 feet, we just need to look at spacing and maybe there's an area where people aren't sitting. We just get into that coverage area. Because we can, again, interface with one ceiling microphone array, that's, again, that completely depends on the ceiling microphone manufacturer. Good rule of thumb, though, is it's about like a 30-foot coverage zone. Again, depending on ceiling height, all that other fun stuff, where that thing is at. If our rooms are, needing more microphone coverage than this, again, doesn't mean that we can't do it. It just means we're back into that Q-SYS core system where we can scale that thing up to as many microphones as we need, depending on that need of that room. So we've got this system plugged in, working. Everyone's happy. One of the really cool things is this also interacts with Q-SYS Reflect. So Q-SYS Reflect is our cloud management that handles Q-SYS cores. It still connects the exact same way that those cores do. But one kind of added feature that we get is this mass deployment through presets. So really, again, the folks that go out and run the cables, hang the TVs, hang the cameras, they're going to stick around for about another 10 to 30 minutes to commission the system, depending on what's going on. That's not a lot of time. But if we're talking 100 rooms, 10 to 30 minutes per room, it starts to add up, especially if the rooms are cookie cutter, exactly the same rooms. This is where this mass deployment preset comes in real handy because we can go do one room, save that preset up in Reflect, and deploy it out to as many places as we need to. Some of the other cool features of Reflect, and these are not just RoomSuite features, but these are features for our core systems as well. We get into space managers. So maybe your organization or your end user has lots of different spaces throughout the world. They can kind of quick and easy see what's going on in each one of those locations. System Explorer. So maybe if you've got hundreds of systems on Reflect, it can be a bit of a challenge to find the thing you need. This is where we can kind of easily go in and enable certain tags to categorize systems. And then another really cool thing to talk about is Q-SYS Connect. So again, Q-SYS Connect is actually not a Reflect thing. It actually has to do with Q-SYS cores as well. And so when I talked about this slide of these UC computes, we talked about the fact that you had to have a controller or a piece of glass from somebody else that was the certified Zoom Teams controller. Well, some challenges with that. That connection is usually USB. Not a huge fan of USB connections, especially long USB connections. There can be some funkiness. And we end up with really just one of those controllers per system. Where Q-SYS Connect comes into play is the fact that we can get that control on top of a Q-SYS piece of glass, so our TSC touch panel. Now, at the moment, this is a Zoom Room feature only, so not functioning for Teams, not set up for Teams. But if your end user is doing Zoom Rooms, we can actually get that control on top of a Q-SYS TSC panel. So what that kind of looks like, skip through some of this fun stuff to get to the really good stuff. Again, we're just adding that Q-SYS touch panel, but the cool thing here is now we can actually get multiple TSCs with that Zoom room control. When you get into the Q-SYS core side of things, you're not limited to those two, so we can do divisible rooms and things like that really nicely with Zoom room control. So that really brings us to the end of this. I'd love to have a little bit of Q&A time and see what y'all have come up with for some fun questions to stump Angela. She'll take all the difficult ones.
I'm sorry, Angela is not available right now. Please leave a message after the beep.
I was kind of paying attention a little bit to the Q&A. Were there any like ones that are worth a good call out or stuff that reoccurring questions?
I think there's a couple that are definitely worth talking about. Jeff Miller asked, is there a recommended PIR accessory? And while we don't have a specific one that we recommend, just knowing what the specs are, and so I listed those in the chat, but just to give everybody that information that you're looking at PIR or dual tech occupancy sensors. So dual tech is PIR plus the ultrasonic side. If it's plus 24 or powered by plus 24 volts DC, we can actually power it off of the RoomSuite Modular System, which I think is a pretty cool, like you don't have to bring in an extra power supply. If it is powered otherwise, you would probably have to power it separately somewhere. 50 milliamps maximum current on that 24 volt DC. And then just making sure that it can connect to a GPIO on our RMP 100. I have, in fact, asked if anybody has used a specific occupancy sensor, and the Acuity CM9 was what I got back. So I haven't put that in the chat, but we actually have had some of our folks test with the Acuity CM9. Not a surprise that we're testing with some Acuity parts, but it actually works and works well. And then the one question that I was answering, which API is recommended for enterprise scale integrations? And what are the security best practices when exposing Q-SYS controls to third-party systems? I think the first question is, it's an open API, so you can technically integrate it with anything. However, we do have a certified connection for ServiceNow. It's actually in their online store. I don't think it costs anything, but it does allow you to set up that connector between Reflect and ServiceNow pretty seamlessly. And then the security best practices when exposing Q-SYS controls to third-party systems. That is a really, I mean, that gets into like pen testing and all of that, and may not be appropriate for this particular webinar. But I would recommend asking that question again to somebody that's got some time to really deep dive it with you. I think that we really try to comply with network security protocols at Q-SYS, and we do support two-factor authentication and single sign-on, and we try very hard to, like I said, we try hard to comply. But I could probably spend an hour talking about all the details of that, so we'll leave it at that for now. And I think that was it. Then we just had a question of, can we use an iPad as the control interface? Technically, if you actually have the RMP 100 connected to, say, a Wi-Fi network, you can see that interface in UCI Viewer. However, it's not really a supported function or way to use the RoomSuite bundle.
Yeah, and that falls into probably more of a Q-SYS core system if the requirement is wireless control. Absolutely, we can do that with a Q-SYS core and setting those UCIs wherever they need to go.
And then Jeff Miller asks, can we set up a system security deep dive webinar? That's a great idea. And hi, Jeff.
It's so secure, it exists, and you can find it. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it does exist, just nobody can find it. That's a great idea for a deep dive. I know we've done some networking deep dives. If you go into our quantum training, there's a lot of network deep dives, but definitely not one that talks specifically about security. So it's a great suggestion.
I think we can definitely pass that one along to the powers that be for good topics for deep dives.
You didn't tell me I'd have to talk in this deep dive.
Yeah, you got to handle all the difficult questions.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank all the folks that attended. There's an awful lot of people that sat here and listened to us talk about RoomSuite Modular System for an hour or so today. Steve, thank you for giving us this content and providing it for everybody. The PDF of the presentation and the recording of this webinar will be provided to those attendees. I don't do that particular thing, but we are recording. We have recorded this, so you will see those things come out here within the next week or so. So I appreciate everyone being here, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Happy to help.